Hi Spicewood kiddos, it's Miss Rayborn here. Before I get started, let me just tell you what I gathered together. I have some watercolor paints and a paintbrush. I have a tub with some water in it, pardon me, that I'm setting off to the side. And then I have some crayons and a piece of paper. So you can go ahead and pause there if you want to gather all your things together, or you can listen to the video and then gather your things later. I'm going to do my drawing to start with crayons. You could draw first with a pencil. You could also use oil pastels with this idea. It would work really well as well, but I'm just going to stick with crayons because I think most people will have those at home. So we're going to do an oil or a sort of a wax and watercolor resist painting, meaning that the wax in the crayon is going to push away from the water in the oil pastel. And Miss Rayborn loves to do this. I'm sure you've done this at home at some point in time, possibly, or at school for sure. The great thing about this is this allows us to keep our colors from blending into each other. Now, one of my favorite things actually is to do this with a white crayon or oil pastel, because when you paint, you won't see it when you first draw, but when you paint, you'll see all of those awesome white lines show up. But for the sake of seeing it on the piece of paper as I draw, I'm not going to use white today because that would make that very hard to see and the direction's a little bit strange. But you definitely could try this with a white colored pencil. You also could do all of this with colors if you wanted to. Miss Rayborn is going to stick to just black today. And I'm going to pick kind of an abstract design. You could choose to draw a character. You could choose to draw yourself, like a self-portrait. You could choose to draw a pet or a family member or a place you'd like to visit, or just something from your imagination. Miss Rayborn is going to start off by just creating some shapes on my paper. And they're not perfectly shaped. As you can see, this one got a little not quite roundish. It's almost like a stone or a pebble, but I think I kind of like that. I'm also going to create some things that are overlapping each other because I'm looking to create just some different areas of interest on my paper. And then I'm going to create some pattern around and involved in these. Now, like I said, you absolutely could create almost anything with this drawing. It does not have to be an abstract drawing. Oops, I broke my crayon, but that's okay. It does not have to be an abstract drawing like Miss Rayborn says. What I'm doing right now is sort of just filling up my shapes and overlaps that I've created with some other patterns because I'm going to paint some patterns into them. So I'm just creating some variety in the shapes that I've drawn by giving them a little bit of shape and line pattern inside of them. Now, I might not give all of them a shape or a line pattern. I might use diagonal lines on some, straight lines on the other. I could just create just really a variety of pattern using my crayon. Now, as we said, you might decide to draw a character. You might decide to draw a place that you like to visit. Ooh, that one didn't work out well over here. We'll see how that goes when I'm done. I can draw in my outside edges a pattern, like one of Miss Rayborn's favorite things to do to fill a space is to create my own little kind of spiral design if I need to fill a spot or a space. Using a variety of different kinds of lines to fill a spot or a space can be really nice if you're just trying to figure out how to create or fill with a pattern. So I'm just kind of filling to the edges because I'm creating, like we talked about, kind of an abstract design. I don't have any other kinds of shapes in here right now, which I'm realizing I might want some variety of shapes. Maybe I'll draw some that overlap where I've already been, since I have kind of made everything sort of the same. I drew some other shapes on top, like rectangles and things going over the edges. Maybe I'll put one in there as well. So right now I just started off with a lot of shape and line pattern, but again, you could be drawing just about anything with your either crayons or oil pastels. And some people like to start with a pencil and then trace over their lines. It's up to you. Next, you're going to do a little bit of painting. And the great thing about using watercolor paints with any kind of a waxy drawing medium, either an oil pastel or a watercolor, is that when I get my paintbrush wet, and we know that with watercolors, we would want to just sort of tickle the top of our paint. We don't want to really shove it in there, otherwise you'll damage your paintbrush and also your paints as well. You'll get a big hole inside of them. So the great thing about this is that if I'm careful, this blue will stay really nicely inside of the places where I'm painting it. For example, if I wanted this blue to be just this little section of this pattern, I can do that because of the wax in the crayon. The wax and the water will sort of push away from each other and it traps that blue paint inside of there. So if I rinse out my paintbrush, for example, and I get a color that's quite different, maybe some nice bright white yellow, if I accidentally mixed this yellow in with this, I would end up making myself a green, right? And my colors would start to mix. But if I'm extra careful and I paint inside of my lines, I can keep those colors very close to each other without them mixing with one another, which is pretty awesome when you're doing some painting. Oh, look, I accidentally made an oops, and my blue came out over the top because I wasn't careful enough to keep it from touching that spot right there. But I think I actually even kind of like it. It's kind of a happy accident. Maybe I'll mix it a little bit so that it looks intentional on my paper, like I was doing a little bit of shading. So when you continue to add color to your painting, remember that as long as you're careful, you can keep those colors from blending just by making sure that you're not going over the edges of your wax layer or line that you made, whether you made it with oil pastel or you made it with crayon. If you're extra carefully, you can keep those colors from blending or mixing with one another. So you could make this painting extremely colorful without having to worry about your colors blending and mixing together. So I will send you off to create your own beautiful painting with wax and watercolor resist. You can use crayons, you can use oil pastels. Either one of those will work for drawing your lines, and then go right around them gently to create a lot of color without accidentally having any mixture that you don't want. My last sort of pro tip is that sometimes I do want there to be color mixing. For example, maybe let's try this little spot right here. So say I started off with a beautiful sort of reddish orange color, but I did in fact want to create some more pattern inside of there. I can rinse out my paintbrush, get a darker color, sort of a darker reddy color, and I can drop in little dots of color into there. And even though they start to blend and mix and look a bit like tie-dye, they won't go outside of the lines if I've done a good job of keeping my paint inside. So you can actually even mix inside of these if that's something that you're interested in, to create your own new colors or your own new patterns or tie-dye kind of effects. So I hope you enjoy experimenting with wax and watercolor relief, either with crayons if you have some at home, or oil pastels if you happen to have those, and any kind of paint that you use a water paintbrush first, wet, and then you sort of tickle the top of it to add to your color. So I hope you enjoy this optional activity for this week. Remember that this is not something you have to do or turn in. I wanted us to have something just really fun and enjoyable for our last time together before we head off to the break. So I'll send you off to get drawing and painting. If you'd like to, remember you can always share with Miss Rayborn via her email if you decide you want to share what you create. So for now, I'm going to bid you goodbye, and I hope you have a really wonderful break. Bye for now.